What's happening, friends? Welcome to another edition of Syracuse Basketball Postgame presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. My name is Brent Axe. Great to be with you here as Syracuse, how about this, 2 in a row for the Orange. They came into the week without a win over a Power 5 team. They end the week with 2 wins over Power 5 teams, Georgia Tech earlier this week at the Dome, and Boston College today, a 79-71 win over the Eagles. Syracuse goes on a 22-6 run late in the game, and not only has Syracuse won 2 in a row, they have won both of those games without Donnie Freeman in the lineup. He sits out again with that lower leg injury, and I'll tell you what, it looks like Adrian Autry has found the lineup that he needs to get through until Freeman comes back. And even when Freeman comes back, maybe after all this time, as Syracuse moves to 8-8 and 2-3 in ACC play, it took about half the season for Autry to find the right combination. We'll see if that continues to be the case, but it certainly worked today for the Orange. Not a lot of three-pointers in this game, back and forth game in the paint, but some clutch three-pointers hit by Kyle Cuffe Jr. Uncle Brent's been telling you all year long that Kyle Cuffe Jr. needs to be in the lineup more, and he may have just earned himself a spot in the starting lineup. We will see about that. We'll hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. They were fantastic, as always, throughout the game. And being a Syracuse Sports Insider means that you get direct text message access to me. Love seeing the ebb and flow and the emotions of Syracuse fans during games, the great insight that you provide, even through some football nuggets your way during the game. Deuce Chestnut is returning to the football team in 2025. It was announced that LaQuinn Allen is going to play in the Senior Bowl, though I think there's a little confusion on that because you can't play in both the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine Bowl, but we'll sort out all that football stuff later. But that's the beauty of being a Syracuse Sports Insider. You could be sitting there watching a hoops game, and Uncle Brent's got some football nuggets for you there. And you can text me your thoughts, your questions, your opinions, the things you want us to ask Syracuse players and coaches. And it's just $3.99 a month to have that exclusive access on this podcast. We do not highlight comments from social media on the post-game shows on the podcast. Only Syracuse Sports Insiders get their voice heard here on Syracuse Sports. So we'll hear what they had to say about this one coming up later. JJ Starling, if I could just use the pun here, guys, is a star. And how he has played for this team since returning from that hand injury has been extraordinary. He had 26 points in this game and did not hit a three and only went to the free throw line twice. That was another huge factor in this game, by the way. I say it all the time. You say it in your sleep. You know it, you love it. Free throws matter. They really did in this game because of how Syracuse was in the bonus, was getting to the free throw line. It was a mixture of guys. Eddie Lampkin, shout out to him, who we'll talk about here shortly, hitting his free throws down the stretch. Lucas Taylor hitting his free throws down the stretch. JJ hit a couple down there. Like everybody, I think they had 12 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. I might be off a little bit on that. But this is a team that has struggled at the free throw line all year long, and they made their free throws. But JJ Starling, to get 26 points without a three-pointer, 12 of 22, adds 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 36 minutes. He has just taken over this team. Syracuse lacked an offensive identity for most of the year, certainly with JJ out for 7 games. They're just trying to get by. You know what SU's offensive identity is at this point? Get out of JJ's way. Let JJ create. Let him get to the hoop. Let him run the offense. If he's the point guard, the 2 guard, whatever title you want to put on him, JJ is the guy now. Not that we didn't know that, but certainly has been the case since he got back from that hand injury. There was a moment early in the game when he went up for a dunk and there was a foul, and you're like, ooh, man. We're more hesitant and afraid for JJ to do that than he is. He is playing as if that hand injury did not exist. He's the guy, and opposing teams are going to know that, and there was a good stretch of the second half of this game where he needed help on the offensive front, which finally came from Eddie Lampkin and finally came from Kyle Cuffe when he got out there, and we'll talk about him shortly, and just gave JJ the compliment that he needed. It was actually Chris Bell in the past couple of games. Bell had been much better with JJ back in the lineup, but Chris Bell struggled today. Elijah Moore really struggled today, which is why I think we're going to see a change in the lineup going forward. And there's still a couple guys that Syracuse needs to consistently help JJ out, but he is the shining star. He is the go-to guy. He is the man, and let JJ create. Now, again, the issue there is that beacon is up. every opposing team that plays Syracuse is going to try to harass JJ, keep him out of the offense. And frankly, if you can double JJ or however you can just kind of chip him and keep him out of the offense, it hasn't been proven that somebody else is going to take the ball and take over the game. But you had an encouraging offensive output from Lucas Taylor today. Much better first half than second half, but he ends up with 15 points, 2 3-pointers. You will take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday from Lucas Taylor, who's been in the starting lineup the past couple of games, 5 of 6 at the free throw line. We mentioned Eddie Lampkin. Look, you got to take the good with the bad with Eddie Lampkin, who had 10 points, 13 rebounds, 3 fouls in this game. He played 33 minutes. That's a lot of minutes for Lampkin, who's lumbered through a back injury. He's not in the greatest shape. I mean, he fights through out there despite those things. So you got to take the good with the bad. Eddie can give the ball up a little bit. He can hold on to the ball a little bit too long. But he has come through in the second half of the past couple of games. Something just clicks for Eddie when it's clutch time. You need him in the basket. Syracuse doesn't have anybody else they can put out there. Some people were asking me on the text line, why isn't Naheem McLeod out there? McLeod just can't handle his own out there. He's too slow. I think that foot injury really affected him. He can't get up and down the court. I know he's 7'4" and takes up a lot of space there defensively, but he just can't keep pace at the pace that Syracuse wants to play. So he's only an emergency guy when Lampkin is in foul trouble or otherwise really struggling, and Naheem McLeod didn't even check into this game, right? They go with a smaller lineup. Peter comes in. You just do other things. So you take the good with the bad with Eddie. You're going to get hustle from Eddie. 13 rebounds you will take, and Syracuse, again, it was actually an even 36-36 rebounding mark. That has not been an issue for Syracuse all year, and you got to give credit where it's due there. Jyare Davis, the best stat from Jyare Davis's box score is 0. Well, Brent, he had 12 points. He had 8 rebounds. He was big down the stretch for Syracuse. 6 of 12, 34 minutes. Why is 0 the best stat? Because he didn't take any threes. This was a game with minimal three-pointers, with clutch three-pointers from Cuffe, as, again, we'll mention in a second here. But Jyare Davis played the kind of game that you want Jyare Davis to play against Boston College. In the paint, around the hoop, attack, try and get to the free throw line. He's not the greatest free throw shooter in the world, but that's what you want Jyare Davis to do. You will take 12 and 6 from him. You will take the numbers from Lucas Taylor, Eddie Lampkin. You got 5 guys. Was it 5 or 6 who ended up in doubles here? So you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in doubles today. And if both Taylor and Davis in the starting lineup with Donnie Freeman out right now are there, you got to take that. The other guy in doubles today was Kyle Cuffe. Kyle Cuffe needs to start in the backcourt now with JJ Starling. They tried JJ and Elijah Moore. Ultimately, I want to see JJ and Elijah Moore in the starting lineup, but man, Elijah Chapa, he's just really struggling right now. And I don't know if we're beyond freshman struggles, speed of the game, ACC opponents, physicality. He's limited in what he can do inside the three-point line. They're really working on that with his game. I know he's trying to break through there, but his primary function out there is to shoot threes. And he played 13 minutes in this game, and there's just zeros across the board, short of a rebound and a couple of shot attempts that he took in this game. So that is the latest challenge. And the ups and downs of a season, players go up, they go down, they have hot streaks, they have cold streaks. Chris Bell has the ultimate cold streak, comes back, scores a little bit in a couple of games, looks like he's back in the flow, struggled again tonight, right? Like that's what you deal with as a coaching staff. Elijah Moore is lost out there on the court, and you hate to see it. He's a good kid. He plays hard, and he's going to be, I think, a great player at Syracuse. But we forget these things, right? We hear so much about hype and buildup, and we're in the NIL era and rankings, and Moore came in, I think, having shot more three-pointers than anybody at the high school level last year. If not, he's certainly at the top of the list. And we forget that with all the talk of money and everything, they are still student athletes. Now they've been on break, so they're not exactly bogged down with class. The new semester starts on Monday, as a matter of fact, so that will start to get back in the flow of things, and it'll be good to see the students back with a big game coming up for Syracuse as well, as we'll get into here shortly. But Chop is really struggling, so he's got to be out of the starting lineup because it's still important who starts on this team. Syracuse got off to a better start. That has been an encouraging sign. I think just the third time this year. It was kind of weird, too. The first TV timeout didn't come until there was like 12 minutes to go I was like, hey, running clock, let's go. We're not going to do TV timeouts today. But Syracuse has only led at that first TV timeout, I believe 3 out of 16 games this year, 3 or 4. It's not a very long list. Trust me. So when you get to that timeout, who's playing well, who looks like they're in the flow, who's struggling, Chop is really struggling right now. So much like Chris Bell, he's got to be taken out of the starting lineup. And sometimes that mentality, you take the pressure off, you come in as somebody that can contribute off the bench, and there's just a different mind frame you're in there, which is why I'm somewhat hesitant to put Kyle Cuffe in the starting lineup, because it's like a relief pitcher in baseball, right? Not a lot of relief pitchers could start and vice versa. It's just you're given a certain role and you get in that mind frame, and once that changes, it can mess with your game. But as Autry said in his post-game press conference, and I'm paraphrasing here, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw the quotes. He said, Kyle Cuffe made me put him out there with the way he's been playing, not only in practice, but in these games. Cuffe looks comfortable. He's somebody that provides a lot of energy on the court. He will attack the hoop, but man, those 3-pointers that Kyle Cuffe hit down the stretch of this game were massive. And that 22-6 run that we mentioned, one of those threes came. So Cuffe drives to the hoop, that cuts into a Boston College lead and made it 54-48. BC holding the lead and looking like this one was slipping away from Syracuse down the stretch. Cuffe hits a 3 that makes the score 59-58, and then he hit another 3 that made it, I think, 62-58, if I'm not mistaken, right in there. Kyle Cuffe looks like he belongs. I'm curious to see what a Kyle Cuffe with 34 minutes versus 17. Remember, he had that game a couple back where he did play huge minutes and looked like he can belong out there for extended period of time. Autry said it. He has made me put him out there, and now you got to start him. So I think the lineup that you have now, that is your best lineup, with hopefully Chris Bell coming off the bench and giving you something. We know Moore can't give you anything off the bench right now. Peter's up and down, the maestro, when he comes off the bench. But with those pieces off to the side, Jaquan Carlos, of course, in that conversation as well, who also had a big 3 in this game. Not a huge game statistically for Carlos, who played his way out of the starting lineup as well, but a 3 nonetheless when they needed it. So your best lineup right now is JJ Starling, Kyle Cuffe, Lucas Taylor, Jyare Davis, Eddie Lampkin. Now, when Freeman comes back, Davis goes to the bench again, and he'll still play key minutes and play big minutes. And look, Freeman's defense has been pretty bad, but he's your leading rebounder. You need Freeman in the paint. He's an offensive threat. Like, that's a guy that is going to be back in the starting lineup as soon as he's healthy. And he's listed as day-to-day. He probably could play Tuesday. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast here, but that's a big game you're going to need Freeman for. So if you're Adrian Autry, it's one of those that there was that great line from the movie The Program where he says, son, are you hurt or are you injured? And he was confused. Well, what do you mean? If you're hurt, you can play. If you're injured, I got to sit you, right? So if you're day-to-day and it's an ankle situation and you can fight your way through it, you got to play against Louisville, and you know you've got Jyare Davis that can complement you anyway. So I think Autry's in a good position there. Maybe you start Freeman or you play Freeman, but you can limit his minutes if that ankle's not 100%. But this is a big game for Syracuse in the sense of, okay, you beat Georgia Tech, one of the lower teams in the ACC. You beat Boston College, one of the middle-of-the-pack ACC teams. And let's face it, there are a lot of games on the schedule that are 50-50 games, that are swing games, that could go either way. There's not a lot of good teams in the ACC. Duke is obviously in a stratosphere above everybody. Did you see Cooper Flagg today? 42 points, a Duke freshman record. Think of all the great freshmen Duke's had. He's got the record now. Did that against Notre Dame today. Louisville's 5-1. I think people look at Louisville and say, man, weren't they like the worst team in college basketball a couple of years back, the brutal Kenny Payne days? Yes, they are. They make a coaching change. They're 12-5. They're 5-1 in the ACC. Big win over Pitt today. Clemson's 5-1. You got a bunch of teams after that that just are go either way games. Wake Forest, who Syracuse lost to on New Year's Eve. North Carolina, a lot of talent, but in 3-1 in ACC play, they're winning when it matters. But I don't think Syracuse can match up with that team toe-to-toe, but you do get them in the Dome this year. Pitt is good, though slipping a little bit now, 3-2 in ACC play. And You got a whole bunch of teams with 2 ACC wins. SMU, Stanford, NC State, FSU, Syracuse played, Georgia Tech, there's a lot of 50-50 games like today that if you can pile up a few of these, look, Syracuse can turn its season around. As bad as things have been, I still don't think this is a tournament team, but you don't want to be one of the 3 teams that don't make the ACC tournament. And that they were staring at that reality just a week or 2 ago. Maybe they can play their way out of that, and maybe they're finding some kind of rhythm here. They're still a team that has issues. They're still at a disadvantage in some ways, and it's still going to take a lot for this team to climb out of the hole it dug itself. Let's be honest here, but they're doing it. 8-8, 2-3 in the ACC, and if they're finding the right lineups here, the right guys that need to be in and out, it took too long for that to happen, frankly, but better late than never, right? But that Louisville game is going to tell us a lot about where this team is. They got to punch up on somebody, and if you can punch up on somebody, you would certainly prefer to do that. While the JMA Wireless Dome has not been a huge home court advantage this year, Tuesday night, students are back in town. There's a little more juice now. I think some people will be more apt to go to that game that maybe wouldn't on a Tuesday night. Like, okay, they've won a couple in a row. Like, I think the atmosphere is going to be a hell of a lot better at that game than it was at the last home game. So all those are good things for Syracuse, and they're checking a lot of pluses that they need to at this point. So that lineup, I would expect, if Autry is playing his cards right, and I don't think he's going to mess with it, JJ, Kyle Cuffe, Lucas Taylor, Jyare Davis. If Freeman can't start, if Freeman can come back, he starts, and, of course, Eddie Lampkin in that lineup. So this is one of those games that could have gone either way, guys. BC's up. I mentioned it, 54-48. It feels like things are slipping away. The offense, there were certainly times in this game they were unorganized, they were flat, and it was just tinkering. But as just the whole way, especially in the first half, I'm like, man, Syracuse should be up more than this. They should be up 6, 8, 10 points. It never felt like BC played that well. I mean, Han Jr.'s great. He's one of the better players in the ACC. He had 20 points. He's a 90% free throws matter shooter, 9 of 9 at the line, 9 rebounds. Great player, right? Beadle got going down the stretch for BC. He has 17 points. Venning, big boy. That matchup between Venning and Eddie Lampkin in the paint was fun to watch today. He had 17, right? Points in the paint, close. 40-38. We mentioned the rebounds, close, 36-36, right? So what Syracuse has not been able to do is take a lot of those 50-50 games, a lot of those moments where it's close, and grab it. They did in this game. We mentioned the 22-6 run. Now, again, for a good chunk of the second half, if you had told me that Syracuse would end up winning the second half 47-39 and that Syracuse would go on a 22-6 run with the way their offense was stagnant and JJ was doing everything, I would not have believed you. But Cuffe gave him that injection. Davis was good. We mentioned Lampkin coming around, getting those rebounds. I mean, offensive rebounds could be better for Syracuse. Here's another key stat, by the way, that, here we are almost 20 minutes into the show, and I haven't even mentioned it. In the last, let me double check myself here, guys. In the last 5 games, Syracuse has been averaging 18 turnovers a game. That's ugly. That's just unacceptable. You cannot turn the ball over that much. Captain Obvious, right? Syracuse had 5 turnovers in this game. Now, maybe that's BC is not very good on defense. That's Syracuse taking better care of the basketball. They only assisted on 8 of 29 field goals. I think that's something that can be better. But you're averaging 18 turnovers the last 5 games, and one of them was a win, Georgia Tech, right? You only turn the ball over 5 times today, and you can bank that, and you could process that, and you can say, well, that must have been, I haven't seen Autry's whole press conference. That had to be one of the first things he said, right? Or one of the first things he said to the team. You guys only turn the ball over 5 times today. That's huge. If you don't turn the ball over and you make your free throws, not just down the stretch, but through the game, 16 of 22, 72%, you could be better than that. But in this case, it was timing. The way they made their free throws down the stretch was huge. Syracuse was only 5 of 15 from the three-point line, okay? We've accepted this is not a good three-point shooting team. I shouldn't say we've accepted it, but that's what they are. Today, 5 of 15 but it was the it was the quality. It was the timing of the threes, especially from Cuffe, versus the quantity, especially when you're playing a team that also can't hit threes. What was BC? 4 of 16 from the three-point line. So when you have these things that, for lack of a better term, you can get away with, that the other team's not going to kill you, they're not going to lean in on one of your weaknesses. Like if you're playing a good three-point shooting team and they hit 12 and you only hit 5 and you just can't keep pace with that, and there are teams Syracuse is going to face that fit that description. But when you can get in kind of the, you can get in the arena, get in the mud pit with somebody who shares some of the flaws that you do, who crawls out of it, right? This was a much better game than the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech game, 62-55, not the most aesthetically pleasing thing. This looked like a game. This actually looked like a basketball game today, again, with the lack of threes. And that's the most impressive thing about JJ's 26 points. Didn't hit a three-pointer in this game and only had 2 free throws. It's one thing if you got 26 points and you went to the free throw line 12 times down the stretch because you got the ball in your hands. 26 points with only 2 at the free throw line, and he didn't hit a 3. That shows you how impressive he is in the paint, how he's flowing to the basket, and how something has just clicked. You have seen a player go to the next level, quite literally, before our very eyes here. And Autry has said he's one of the best guards in the ACC and in the country. I don't know if I'd put JJ up there in terms of best guards in the country at this point, but in the ACC, no question about it. And if he keeps on this pace, he's going to change my mind about that other thing. And he's really going to get some people to notice what he's doing up here at Syracuse. So, look, all told, that's a solid win. It's a solid win. Take care of these 50-50 games. Take advantage of the matchups and the advantages you do have. Survive the flaws as best as you can. Other teams are going to exploit it better, and Louisville is one of them, by the way. But now you got a home game against a good team, and you're feeling it, you're confident, and maybe you can punch up a little bit and beat a team that's, Louisville's playing great right now. But the ACC, as down as the league is right now, can give you those types of games where you can get people to notice. Syracuse has that chance now to get people to notice them for things different than what Autry was referring to. Even after a win, how irritated he was after the Georgia Tech game, talking about the noise that surrounded the team. The noise, the conversation, the temperature comes down when you win games like this, right? See what our Syracuse Sports Insiders had to say about this one. You've seen it at the bottom of your screen. If you've been watching on YouTube, text the word orange to 315-847-3895 to become a Syracuse Sports Insider. Another great way is to hit that link, joinsubtext.com/Syracuse Sports. Let me say that one more time for those of you just listening. Join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports to become a Syracuse Sports Insider, to get direct text message access to me, your comments highlighted exclusively here on Syracuse Sports. You can text me anytime. The back and forth we have with our insiders is amazing. If I have breaking news, you get it first. You get my commentary, analysis, tidbits. Our insiders are awesome. Let's grow the community. Let's make it huge in 2025 and keep this thing building, baby. Matty G is going to lead us off today where he says, those 2 Kyle Cuffe threes were huge, and JJ looks like the glue that keeps this team together. Man, is he dynamic. And Matty adds this: these last 2 games have been fortunate with how bad our opponents are at free throws, but another good momentum-building win while we wait for Freeman to get back healthy. That's a great point that Matty made. They were, BC, 13 of 20 at the free throw line today. He'll take it because Syracuse hasn't been the greatest, but they made their free throws when they needed to in this game, particularly down the stretch. Different Matty. Matty S. says, what a roller coaster game this was. Heart and energy have never been the issue with this squad, and that showed today, that and making free throws. Chuck A. says, this starting 5 also seems to be a better start to the game, and another huge 3 for Cuffe. Nice to actually see Red happy. JJ's playing loose and full of confidence. And Chuck adds this: these guys may just start to click. I thought that Autry was a lot more animated today. I thought he was a lot more into the game today. I thought the passion was there. I thought it was interesting that during a couple timeouts, I noticed Elijah Moore pretty disengaged, not into it. Again, he's really struggling right now. I'll cut him some slack. You got to be in the huddle. You got to be engaged. You can't be the sourpuss on the bench. Chris Bell's unfortunately done that a few times too. Easy for me to say when you're having a really crappy game. you kind of sulk, and I get it. I'll give you a break on that one or two times, but you just can't let that become an issue, right? But there have been some complaints about Autry that it doesn't feel like he's, and again, some guys are obnoxious. I don't equate a good coach with how passionate you are. Like, look how obnoxious like a Buzz Williams is on the sideline. How he would spend half his life needing a technical foul because he was so far on the court, right? Like, that's the other end of the spectrum. You could be a little too into it and passionate, but Autry needed to find that happy medium, and I thought it made a difference. He kind of willed his team in certain situations, passionate in the timeouts, and look, I don't have a lot of complaints about Autry in this game. He wasn't running the hockey lines. He kept the guys in there that needed to. He was patient when somebody else needed to emerge offensively. JJ was looking for that guy. It happened. I think, Autry, no complaints about him in this game for sure. Paul L. says, wow, gutsy win for the Orange. Held their own with the very physical play. He mentioned the rebounding was tight. 5 players in double figures. Lampkin a double-double. And nice to see JJ do JJ things. From Ed P. says, I agree, Brent. Without Freeman, JJ, Cuffe, Taylor, Davis, Lampkin. That's your best combination. Hopefully things can continue to improve. And yes, hashtag free throws matter. From Gabe, who says, big if, Syracuse beats Louisville on Tuesday night, a few people might start peeking back on Syracuse games. Yes, the fans that have been disengaging, perhaps once they thought they were out, they pull me back in. From Jeff N., who says, guess it's an understatement how much Starling means to this team. He's the rudder for the ship. Chris Bell looked dejected on the bench. Yeah, we brought that up a little earlier there. Jim B., not that Jim B., who says, would have bet money when they went down 8 in the second half that this one was over. This team has many faults, but have to give credit for the effort and how they finished the game. A good road win. By the way, their first road win of the season. First road win, neutral site win, first win away from the comfy confines of Syracuse, New York, in the JMA Wireless Dome. Michael S. says, and we'll end here from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Oh, no, we got a couple more. Michael S. says, Starling was obviously the hero of the game, but you can't undersell how huge those 3-pointers were by Kyle Cuffe, for sure, which completely turned the momentum around for the Orange. From my guy Frankie S., who says, let's give Red some love after today's game. We all know what a long, tough season it's been thus far, but these 2 games have been really nice to watch. This team is down players, and today they gutted one out. This team is down. I said that twice for some reason. Sorry. I feel like for the first time this year, Red figured out the right combinations. From Ben S., who says, I think Red might have finally found something with this lineup. Seems long overdue to not only take Carlos and Bell out of the starting lineup, but to reduce their minutes. And Ben will take us home by saying, if Freeman can just improve his defense when he gets back, we might have something here. So what we might have is a better late than never situation, that they finally found the right combos. I think it took too long to get Carlos out of the starting lineup, but it happened. You had to take Bell out of the lineup. I mean, Stevie Wonder could see that, right? Now you've got a lineup where I'm wondering, I love Kyle Cuffe. I have been as big of a cheerleader for Kyle Cuffe as anybody, but I think it's a fair question to ask. Can he play 24, 28, 30 minutes at that clip? Or is Kyle Cuffe essentially a middle reliever? Somebody that can come in, give you 4 or 5 innings, less than that, really, 2 or 3 innings, and dominate, and just has a specialization that works for a team. Cuffe looks like he belongs out there. He's confident. He's quick. He's smooth. If he can hit threes, he hasn't been a consistent 3-point shooter, right? And that's been the one thing I've kind of tapped the brakes on myself on, and just like, Kyle Cuffe should play 40 minutes a game. He just hasn't been a consistent enough scorer. And this team needs scoring at that position. JJ can't do all the scoring at that position. So you have Carlos, who couldn't score, Elijah Moore, who can't score right now. Hopefully he comes around and will give you that punch, which will now, I think, be off the bench. But it's not happening now. So you're like, man, can someone else in that backcourt score? But Cuffe can defend. I think he's a much better defender than Carlos. And maybe you're finally finding it, right? So better late than never is what you hope is happening with this team. And that Jyare Davis is realizing, I've got to stay around the hoop, and that you take the good with the bad with Eddie Lampkin. But, guys, Eddie Lampkin, they mentioned it during the broadcast. He's played 120 college basketball games. Experience will not be a factor for him. You've got it with him. You got to take the good with the bad with his game, but that matters when you've played in the Big 12 and played in a lot of big games and know how to handle this time of the year. JJ Starling, I mean, just get out of his way and let him do his thing right now, right? Maybe, just maybe, I don't want to go over the moon here after 2 games, but this team was fun to watch today. Not the whole game, but when it mattered, they figured out what they needed to do when it mattered, and maybe Red's got something here. And the best things are, as Red said, Kyle Cuffe forced me to put him in the lineup. When those things just come your way and they naturally happen, you don't have to tinker with anything. You don't have to change a lineup. It's just like, it's pretty obvious what you need to do. Sometimes that's the best thing that can happen to you when something drops right in your lap right there. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that. Don't get me wrong. And Autry mentioned it, how Cuff's been great at practice and has kind of wedged his way into the conversation. But it's going to be interesting to see because you're going to play some good teams where these matchups aren't going to work and you're going to have to flip things around. And look, what's going to hold this team back is they can't shoot threes. It didn't matter today. Cuffe had the clutch threes, but you cannot play in college basketball in 2025 and be ranked in the 300s in three-point shooting. 5 of 15 is not going to get it done. You're going to play a bunch of teams coming up in this league that'll hit 5 threes by not only halftime, but by the second or third time out of the game. Some snipers in this league. So that's going to be what holds Syracuse back. Their defense, well, look, their interior defense was, BC got to the hoop. I mentioned the points in the paint. It was close. When Syracuse was making their free throws down the stretch, which was huge, BC's going right down the court and scoring. This is not a good defensive team. So those two things you will always loom around them, and they've got to find ways to adjust to that, as they say, exploit your strengths and hide your weaknesses. So I don't want to go over the moon here, but if your coaches always talk about you got to get better, you got to get better, you got to make progress. What we saw these last 2 games, and I think even before that, there were some positive signs in the Wake Forest game. So since they've flipped to ACC play, right? Or not Wake Forest, Florida State, pardon me. Since they flipped to ACC play, it's fair to say they've made some tangible progress. Some things are coming into the clear, and maybe they're starting to find themselves. You don't want to be doing that on January 11th, but you'd rather do it now than never. Will that continue Tuesday night with Louisville coming in, one of the better teams in the ACC, coming off a win over a close win? They beat Pitt by 4, but certainly one of the better teams in the league right now. So that's when we'll meet again here on Syracuse Basketball Postgame, presented by Krause Health. Syracuse and Louisville. Let me just double check myself. Yep, 7 o'clock tip. That's an ACC network game. We'll be with you for another live postgame show on Tuesday night. Looking forward to talking hoops with you once again. We did a live postgame show on Friday. Syracuse football fans were hoping Kyle McCord would get that waiver, but looks like he just gave up on the waiver and decided to go to the National Football League. But there's going to be so much to report on that front. Spring practice, there's a quarterback competition now. If anybody else gets plucked out of the portal, there's commitments. Like football has no offseason anymore. We'll keep you updated on that, and we'll go live as necessary, like we did with the big news on Friday when Kyle McCord declared for the 2025 NFL Draft. Lots of conversations to come on that, both here on the pod and syracuse.com. And there's a bunch of Syracuse guys that are going to be in these all-star games. Marlowe Wax today, late addition to the Hula Bowl, and he had an interception. Looked pretty good in that game. We got a bunch of Syracuse guys trying to make their way in the NFL Draft, so we'll be covering that. Lacrosse started this week. We got a lot cooking, both here on the pod and the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. So join us as we cruise to the new year here. A lot to discuss, a lot to talk about with you guys, our Syracuse Sports Insiders, and on the pod. So make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whatever you prefer podcast-wise, so when a new episode of Syracuse Sports pops up, you will have it and you can listen or watch on demand on your time. That's going to do it for this edition of Syracuse Basketball Postgame, presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. Thanks for hanging, guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go Bills! And we'll talk to you again Tuesday night after the Orange take on Louisville.